A new era is upon us. Tangent PropTech unites founders, real estate and VC investors, urban leaders, and passionate creators who are improving our communities and cities. Join venture capitalists Jeffrey Berman and Zach Aarons and PropTech entrepreneur Edward Cohen, that's me, to learn about housing innovation, the future of work, and climate tech. We examine these themes through interviews and conversations with PropTech CEOs, real estate owners and operators, and venture investors, and how we can leverage tech and collaboration to help solve the housing crisis, figure out the future of work, and how to decarbonize the built environment. If you would like to get your company's or organization's mission featured on Tangent, email us at tangentcommunity@gmail.com. Hi, I'm Edward Cohen. Welcome to Tangent.
I'm Zach Aarons. Very excited to be here, Edward, as always. Very excited to talk about affordable housing, housing affordability, and financing affordable housing.
Today on Tangent, we have Julius Nyanda, founder and CEO of HouseKeys, unlocking housing opportunity for cities, developers, homeowners, and renters. Hi, Julius. Where does this podcast find you?
Hi, Edward. I'm here in California, sunny California, 72 degrees, Bay Area.
Julius, you spent over a decade helping local governments in California like Beverly Hills, Morgan Hill, and San Francisco, as well as housing developers, translate policy into action and supply while bootstrapping your company. So what led you to start HouseKeys?
We started in a crisis. In 2015, a lot of nonprofits were going out of business. Around that time, grant money had dried up. California had a big redevelopment agency. Billions of dollars went to cities that was allocated to nonprofits. And so cities had these programs they would manage for housing and needed staff, needed folks to actually run them because they have planning departments, they have building departments, but they don't have really housing program management departments. And so we were asked to sort of continue services. And so I took a couple of employees that worked for me at the nonprofit, a couple of software engineers that I'd worked with in the past, and we started really building this company to do this sustainably for cities outside of like a grant supported way, but more for profit that could work in the long run.
So let's talk about the problem because, housing affordability and the housing crisis is something that, not only here on Tangent, we've spoken a lot, but also hosted all sorts of founders and investors trying to solve the housing affordability, accessibility, and supply crisis that we have, not only in US cities, but all around the world. Right now in the US, we've had like 31 different US states have inclusionary housing programs that may be, dedicated to stimulating the demand side of the equation through rental vouchers or through first-time homeowner rates, home buyer rates. But we haven't seen that translate into the supply needed. So cities set their affordability mandates. The case of New Jersey and Mount Laurel comes to mind. Developers often say that there's no way to implement them. So what's broken?
I think the first thing is the city, as I mentioned earlier, even though it seems counter in terms of what you think about a city, they have a planning department that's going to review your plans, check against the zoning. They have a building department that makes sure that what you go vertical lines up with the zoning. But once that's done, once your project's approved and entitled and through the planning commission, they really want you to do it on your own. If attached to that entitlement, you have an affordability commitment, they're expecting the developer to figure all that out in the long run. But the reality is from the time that you start to apply for a project to the time that you get certificate of occupancy, the market could change, factors can change. And so even if a city approves projects, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get built. So around urbanizing cities around the country, you find that these projects are entitled, they're built. They might even do site improvements, but the financing in the market may not be there when they're ready to go vertical, and cities are now stuck with these projects that they can't, actually have built, and their communities are asking them why. So it's really a complicated problem that really requires somebody to be an intermediary to step in and make sure that not only can you make the deal work because you have the occupants that are going to occupy that home, but you're also able to aggregate those occupants and look for capital providers that need those occupants for their impact purposes.
Zach, what have you seen from your seat in terms of, not only your LP developers that are housing developers, but just overall in the public and private landscape, how misaligned the incentives are, and ultimately the one who ends up paying the price is the homeowner and the renter who has to move out of the city. And talking about affordable housing, Jeffrey Berman just entered the scene at a best timing.
Into the house. I just could not let my brother from another mother, Zachary Bartholomew, Christopher Aarons, be on this without me. Julius, it is wonderful to meet you, and I'm sorry that I'm late. I just needed to get pretty. Still can't turn my video on, so you can't see it, but I look like Zach, just a little older.
No worries. Nice to meet you as well, Jeffrey.
I think I might be the only Jewish guy with the middle name Bartholomew Christopher in the world. So
well, my cousin's name is Christopher Wayne. So
wow.
Yeah.
My alter ego is Bruce Wayne.
Can we just talk about the likelihood of ridiculous insider trading that went on with people from the Trump administration shorting the hell out of the market and just dancing and laughing and like, yes, we destroyed it. I'm just kidding, Donald Trump, I love you.
We're supposed to be talking about affordable housing, but I've spoken about it, and Edward, I'll actually answer your question in a minute. But since we're on the subject of tariffs, just for housing development in general, tariffs, if you didn't realize this before, most of the materials we use in the United States to build housing is imported from another country. Not all of it, but a substantial amount of it, including about 80 to 90% of the gypsum, which is used in every single building project, is imported. So housing costs are getting driven up just in general. And as we know, the more housing supply that is placed on the market, the more affordable, because of supply and demand economics, the more affordable housing should become. So let's talk about some of these government interventions that were meant to create more affordable housing or keep existing housing more affordable and how disastrous they've been. So one example is in my home state, New York. A few years ago, the state assembly and legislature enacted these rent laws. The goal of these rent laws was to keep housing costs affordable. Well, what actually happened was it incentivized developers not to put more supply into the market, not to make their existing supply more affordable based on these new laws. It actually caused developers and real estate owners to remove housing stock from the market, to effectively take it off the market. So we have thousands of these units right now in New York State that are sitting empty because it is less expensive for them to leave them empty than it is for them to rent these units. So I would say from a policy perspective, we really need a collaboration between the public sector and the private sector to enact legislation that not only works for the end consumer, but works for the owners as a whole and works for general economic principles as a whole, that incentivizes people financially to build more housing because they can make more money doing it. Another issue we've had to take the opposite end of that in places where there was no regulation whatsoever with respect to what could be built. I'll pick on Texas for a second. We saw markets like Austin where, because of migration patterns coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, developers incorrectly assumed that all of these very, very wealthy people were going to migrate to places like Austin, Texas. So what did they do? They built market rate luxury housing, and they now have one of the highest vacancy rates in the entire country. And those projects were not successful because they couldn't get leased. So we need collaboration between the public and private sector so that we are informing developers on exactly what type of housing stock they should be building based on the projected customers in that particular market. And nowadays, that's much easier to do because of data efficiency, artificial intelligence, all these tools that Jeff and I have been funding for years now make that a potential reality where we can better match supply and demand on the micro level within each city.
To your point, so much of real estate is local, not only at the state level, but at the local level. Yeah, going back to the costs and potential impacts of tariffs, the National Association of Housing Builders estimated that approximately over 7% of all goods used in new residential construction originated in a foreign nation last year, which still sounds a little low compared to, the 80s and 90% in some cases for crucial materials. So, this is just the beginning in terms of housing affordability, housing construction costs getting worse. So, some may say we need a collaboration superpower between the private and the public sector. Going back to HouseKeys, Julius, you guys have a managed marketplace for cities and developers. So where does HouseKeys step in to connect the two?
So think of it like as soon as a developer goes through this process of getting their project entitled, they have a permit condition that's issued by that city that requires them to include a certain percentage of those homes in that project to be affordable. At that point, the city wants to be done. They hand the developer agreement to HouseKeys. HouseKeys says everything from finalizing the legal agreement to making sure they're listing and marketing the properties properly, to connecting with the applicants, to selecting them properly, to doing the eligibility underwriting. All of that is overseen and run by HouseKeys. And so the city's paying us basically to run that housing policy, to make it operationalized and also give feedback. So they're looking at how did this inclusionary housing program or density bonus program or whatever specific plan program affect that development project. And the developer is paying HouseKeys to list their units on the platform and connect to those tenants that meet the eligibility requirements or those buyers that meet the eligibility requirements. So that's really how we get paid. We get paid by the cities to run the programs, the builders to run their listings so that they can focus on the market rate and not deal with their affordable portion of their project. Because obviously, you can spend a lot of staff time as a builder trying to work through your affordability commitment, and you're really focused on your market rate to make the whole project pencil. And then lastly, the consumer who's really having to navigate all these different jurisdictions and figure out what the requirements are, they're trying to get a sense for how can I know, instead of just having it be listed, that if I follow a set of steps and patterns, I'm actually going to get a chance to buy that home or rent that home, not just in the initial construction, but also when there's vacancies or resales in the secondary market. So think of us as a full cycle intermediary that's working for the city, working for the builder. And really our number one customer, even though they don't pay us, is the consumer that needs to know if there's 20, 30, 40 jurisdictions across the state. I know if I have one HouseKeys account, I'm going to be able to apply for all the housing that's available, both at new construction and secondary market.
Like the common app for universities, you may say.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Jeff, have you looked into technology that helps alleviate the housing affordability crisis in the past, or anything that helps, bridge the understanding gap between what policies allow developers to build when it comes to housing?
So there's two questions in there. The answer to the first one is the challenge that we have, to be perfectly candid, is we don't see a venture path for many of these products. And we have to return money and a large profit to our investors. And so that's been a challenge to date when it's come to the affordable sector, which seems to be somewhat counterintuitive since the need is so large. That's one of the things that has tweaked my melons, as they said in the old days. Zach knows what I'm talking about. Then as far as the second part of the question, so we've looked at a number of companies that are in the, should we call it GovTech, municipality tech, whatever it is. And we've gotten close on a few. The challenge that we've had, and this is a gross generalization, but it's instructive for us, which is that there is no harmonious, ecumenical, universal Catholic system of record for municipalities, which makes the interface between, let's call it city, county, state, federal government difficult to harmonize. And then that goes back to the challenge of a venture return. So we've looked at a number of businesses that are quite interesting. We have some friends. There's a venture fund called Commonweal, which you guys may or may not know, that invests in, the managing partner actually used to be at Camber Creek and spun out, so we're pretty proud of that. And he invests in technology specifically germane to this problem area of addressing gaps in technology for government operations. But we've never pulled the trigger on any of them, primarily because we're not as strategic as, let's say, a Commonweal.
I think that's interesting, and totally, in terms of, there's no copy pasting a solution here, and it is a challenge, which is why no one has done it successfully at scale across, the country. But it also, it's kind of resembling of the previous episode where we had pinpoint analytics, which it's hard to collect data for public works, construction works across, every single jurisdiction, but that also creates a potential moat that will be hard to compete with. And then once you have that single source of truth under the same roof, then that really becomes something where you can scale and add the other players that I'm sure Julius is going to talk about, including lenders, including real estate agents and brokers, to the ecosystem where everyone can be, and create economies of scale.
Absolutely. It's definitely a challenge, I think, to work through the economics of it. But I think what makes, at least with HouseKeys, the problem that we're solving is that if you're a GovTech play, you have to think about the dollar amounts that you're solving for. If you're trying to solve for, let's say, accounting or procurement or a lot of things at Tyler Technologies, which is actually a pretty phenomenal publicly traded company that's done that for 40 years, the pain of that, it still exists within the org chart of a city. Somebody's doing that work. Somebody understands that work. I think when you look at how a city engages with housing programs and real estate, they don't have those competencies on their org chart. They're not property managers. They're not lenders. They're not real estate folks. And so they will happily pay a pretty large portion of their overall general budget and even their housing funds to be able to administer these programs long term. And that's really the mix. And then secondly, you have to be program agnostic in a way in terms of inventory type. Like, you can't build this on rental margins. You have to include ownership programs and home buyer assistance programs in there. And these things are run by the cities as well. And so both of those things of being able to solve something that's really a pain point for the city in terms of how they run their housing programs, and not to mention the largest publicly traded builders in the country all have that same problem as well, is that they don't have the org chart to support. If I've got 100 units in a subdivision, I don't want to deal with trying to sell 10 or 20 of them to low to moderate income households and make sure I price it correctly. And then each phase of my project has to make sure that I get a certain number of buyers lined up. And so the pain of both of those large pocket entities, right? My lowest income client is an $80 million city or a multi-billion dollar builder. Those folks are willing to pay what looks like a small percentage of the overall cost of that project. And you can do that throughout the country. Now, if you secure enough of that at the city and the builder level, and you get all 4 major regions of the US on point, what happens is these capital partners that are saying, I can never invest in affordable housing because these deals are too small. They're bringing me like 5 and 10 and $15 million checks. But if somebody can aggregate all these projects and all these units across these major regions, I might be able to come in and make an investment on my balance sheet and carry some of that risk. And a city's going to look at that and say, oh, wow, let's think about bringing that over to our city as well. So I think GovTech is scary because cities are super referential, right? If something works somewhere, it can work a lot of places. And a lot of the folks that are providing government services today are really focused on bringing federal and state programs to help the local government, not those local programs where the city has autonomy, but they just don't have capacity. So we're not talking about federally subsidized programs or state subsidized programs. These are specific plans, density bonus plans, former redevelopment agencies, because even though they're dissolved, there's still a lot of assets remaining. And so these pain points aren't going anywhere, and cities are willing to put up 6 figures to be able to make that happen. And when you aggregate enough of that together, you have a path to $1 billion, $500 million outcomes as a startup that is in this work. You got to be hitting the pain point. There's no pain. There's really no opportunity to really scale something like this.
New Jersey alone has a mandate to generate or renovate 70,000 affordable housing units in the next few years. So yeah, that alone there, seems like there could be scale with the right platform connecting developers and the cities.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the scattered site aspect of this is a nightmare. I mean, every program is a two-edged sword, right? San Diego has a great ADU program, right? ADU density bonus program. So you're creating the ability for folks to generate income as long as they make one or two of the units affordable, the cities are allowing people to build these ADUs. Problem is now you've kind of taken the problem of a developer and exacerbated it, right? Now you've got 2, 3, 4,000 folks in your city all trying to do ADU projects. How do you actually manage that scale, right? How do you manage that scattered site scale? Those are the types of problems that can cost millions of dollars in staff time. The cities are willing to outsource to a HouseKeys if they have the infrastructure to be able to run it. And these are opportunities all over the country, to your point, whether it's a rehab project, whether it's an ADU project, whether it's an ability to acquire and convert market rate housing to below market rate, which people are doing. The challenges are the same across the board. Someone has to step in and provide that intermediary service.
So walk us through your business to date. You've been bootstrapping for 10 years. How many cities, how many projects, units have you helped?
And by the way, that is music to my ears. So you've been bootstrapping this for 10 years, which means that you recognize, at least implicitly, that the venture suitability for the company may or may not be there. You're not trying to remove that risk and raise outside money. You're doing it yourself. You're adding value to something that's critical. I just got to say, that's awesome. Music to my ears.
A lot of it is based on us really understanding we had to earn everything for this business. I mean, in the beginning, when we started, I was working with engineers that wouldn't have thought of themselves as getting into the housing space, right? We didn't get our kind of current engineering team until 2019. So bootstrapping wasn't just about not getting venture capital. It was also earning the right to even hire the kind of engineers that are going to work for startups in the prop tech space. Because in 2015, when we started, there wasn't really this concept of property technology, especially here in Silicon Valley, was non-existent. I mean, in New York, it would have been different, but in California, there's still not really a presence of prop tech investors. So it's kind of like necessity is the mother of invention. That's really what we had to do, was kind of figure out how to put one foot in front of the other. And we made money. I mean, honestly, for most of the cities, we started in 2015. We made $300,000 year one, $600,000 year two, $1.8 million year three.
Revenue,
so we were able to sustain ourselves through a lot of tough times.
Is that revenue or profit?
Revenue.
And what was your margin?
Margins on that are 70% gross.
Fantastic. Zach is stunned into silence.
I'm not. I knew his numbers before this podcast. I've always been impressed by his numbers.
What? Why you gotta one up me like that, guy?
I'm sorry.
It's okay. I still love you.
This episode is brought to you in collaboration with Blueprint, the future of real estate. A few weeks ago, in September, Jeff and I participated in the largest, most global gathering of industry leaders and innovators leading the charge in changing the built environment, from construction to transaction, for 3 days of networking, learning, and ecosystem advancement in Las Vegas. With trillions of dollars of assets and the best global innovators under one roof, the future of the built world happens at Blueprint. Blueprint 2025 will take place at the Venetian Las Vegas from September 16th to 18th. Learn more and join the interest list at blueprintvegas.com. That's blueprintvegas.com. See y'all there.
In terms of tailwinds for HouseKeys, I mean, there's currently 3 bills in California one is enabling high density near transit. The other one's enabling small apartment buildings in between the suburbs and the center. And the other one's enabling small lot homeownership in the suburbs. Do you see these as, propelling HouseKeys and your value propositions even more?
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff related to transit is probably the biggest catalyst for cities that haven't done this in the past. Southern California was not really known for doing a lot of these programs as much as Northern California was. And so transit-oriented housing has really driven a lot of the new construction and new mandates for affordable. But yeah, I mean, the number one tailwind is just the lack of affordability, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And as it gets more expensive per door to build, the idea of naturally occurring affordable housing is, I mean, I don't know anybody's opinion on this podcast about that, but good luck. Good luck with naturally occurring affordable housing in high cost markets around the country. So I think where you're heading is there's going to be zero chance that you're going to be able to sustainably do 100% affordable projects in the next 30 or 40 years, or 100% market rate projects in the next 30 or 40 years. You're going to have mixed income housing as just the baseline for most new construction. And so I think cities Now, if you go to the National League of Cities and some of these conferences, I went a couple of years ago in Kansas City, and it was amazing how many cities had abolished their inclusionary zoning program in the 90s and 2000s. And they were saying, hey, we got to bring this thing back to figure out what's going on. But the consultants, the infrastructure, so to speak, for housing is federal and state. These folks are talking about LIHTC and HUD and Section 8 and project-based vouchers. And you could see cities deflated in the room because they're like, who has the competency? I mean, we get invites from Jersey City. We get invites from Nashville. So part of what the pull is for us to start to actually get venture scale and venture capital is to say, look, we now know that if I look at the major platforms around the country that have been built, they were all built solving kind of a human-centered design problem. Hey, let's focus on the application process. Let's focus on lotteries. Maybe we get into income certifications. They weren't solving the pain point of the city at the center. But there's 19,500 cities in the United States, and many of these are in urbanizing communities that know they have to do something, but there's not a competency. And if they are, there's called like National Housing Association of fill in the blank and all these weird things, not something simple, stupid that a consumer can say, okay, if I get my HouseKeys account and they're anywhere in the country, I can navigate all these programs on behalf of that city. And I think we're sort of in that weird position where we're trying to create a consumer product out of something that has not been historically put in that kind of light. There's a real opportunity to do something special in housing at scale, at venture scale now. Now, it took us 10 years to even be in a position to have this conversation with you. And I was talking to folks earlier about why am I so excited now? It's because AI changes the game. I would have had to screen by screen, click by click, field by field, build the entire SaaS infrastructure end to end, build the network, build the marketplace. And now you're telling me that I have $5 billion in projects in my system, and all that learning, I can abstract away most of those middle layers and now just onboard a city in 5 minutes, give them all the best practices, help them set up and configure their programs, and not have to have a staff member on the ground walk them through all of it. And my team becomes auditors and trainers as opposed to plug it in, right? With enterprise software, you got to plug it in when you're dealing with cities. And now you have the ability to really build something that is intelligent and it's orchestrated, as opposed to being maybe event driven was maybe the fanciest thing you were doing before. But that it takes on a whole different light when you could talk about orchestrating these programs. And if you have all of these consumer profiles and all these project profiles and all these agency profiles in your system, man, the data value of that is amazing. So I think AI gets me excited. I mean, honestly, the SaaS-driven roadmap of HouseKeys was a slog. I was sitting there like, oh, man. But with the AI-driven one, you're kind of like, oh, this is something that really can really change the game in terms of how housing gets built.
Jeff and Zach, what can cities and agencies do, if anything? What's the lowest hanging fruit for municipalities to trying to make affordable housing delivery more effective, and more importantly, working with technologies like HouseKeys to really bring in the private sector, the tech sector, and helping ultimately the developers develop profitable housing?
Well, I think the easiest actually, I shouldn't say the easiest, the lowest hanging fruit is cutting the red tape. Development has become so difficult from every step, from planning, especially permitting, to inspections. Inspections during projects is insanity. In California and in New York, it is just absolutely ludicrous. And so if there was a way to utilize technology to clean house in that regard, I think you'd see a lot more streamlined and probably less expensive process to delivering affordable product.
Yeah, I think I'll reiterate what Jeff's saying, and also something Julius mentioned earlier: connecting the end customer, the renter, the person ultimately dwelling in this affordable housing unit, to the project itself, without a firm in the middle that is hand verifying their income, that is hand auditing them. That just adds to the cost burden of the project, and it infuriates the people involved in these lottery programs. They don't even know if they qualify. They don't know if they make too much money, if they make not enough money. If they think they qualify, sometimes they're thrown out. Sometimes there's just a total lack of transparency and connectivity. And there's a labor shortage around people doing this work. And it's labor that can be automated away with a lot of these new GPT, LLM based technologies that are gaining traction. So I echo the enthusiasm that Julius shared, where we're finally in a place where, you know, we're not necessarily going to use technology to remove the red tape that Jeff's talking about. That has to come from the legislative level, but the technology can help us deal with the red tape a lot faster and a lot more efficiently. If you can remove humans from inspections, audits, verifications, qualification processes, you can get this done a lot quicker and a lot more profitably for both the city and the developer.
Yeah, and I would follow with the fact that if you can make these programs observable, I mean, when we say program in our system, what we mean is an operationalized policy, right? It's an instance of policy. And I think what happens when policy is created, and Jennifer Polka just read a great book in 2023, Recoding America, where she talks about this at the federal level with the healthcare.gov site. It's like the folks that make policy almost looked at the implementation folks like, that's the, minions that do the implementation, but the cool stuff is making the policy. But if you can make the policy observable real time and who it impacts and what's the pricing impact and what's the market impact of this policy, and you make that, you can't look away as a policy maker because this is so conspicuously presented on a platform like HouseKeys that has consumers tied to it. Now it's almost like, oh, we have to make more intelligent policy. We have to remove the red tape because now it's obvious because the optimization or at least the lack thereof is obvious now because these systems allow for that. And underwriting and these other things that we've been laboring over, it's not just that the underwriting was handled with labor. It is that underwriting wasn't intelligent. If you create a profile in a system that's meant to determine eligibility, it should just be real time. You should always know every county that you're in. There's 3,000 counties in the United States. That's how AMI is set. Area median income is set by your county. If I'm in any county in the United States, I should be able to know if I get a raise or if I get a bonus or if I get something else, that in LA County, I'm, a certain income category. In another part of the United States, I'm in another income category. And that should be real time. It shouldn't be, forget the project for a second. Just help people understand that their HouseKeys profile can be as valuable or way more valuable than their Facebook profile because it can tell you real time what your income category is. And it doesn't just qualify you for rental. It might qualify you for down payment assistance, for a home ownership program. Oh, and by the way, a ton of other community and economic development programs. Even sometimes your gas bill is tied to your income category. There can be all kinds of benefits for folks. And so if somebody's building with that in mind, but hey, my carrot is home ownership, right? People want home ownership. So we're handling the life cycle that consumers get excited about so that you can make underwriting be something that's real time and intelligent. And recommendation engines don't need to just be for Netflix, right? You can really build really cool stuff with what AI allows at low cost, by the way, at super low cost. AWS, I don't want to plug them too much, but Amazon Bedrock makes a lot of these models available for shops like us. And it really does unlock something major that honestly, 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been here. I'd have told you, oh man, I'm slogging through the SaaS. I'm trying to do like what NFX Guild calls the SaaS market, network, marketplace, all that stuff. Now I'm like, nope, fully orchestrated AI. We are pro-core for development, essentially. So you can really do something special now with real estate that I don't think you could. And that red tape can now not hide. Because that red tape hides, man. People put policies together for 20 years screwing up the market, and they never have to face the music as to what that did. But if you have the contextual data, the augmented reality data, and the AI to understand what's happening both on the platform and the world that the platform exists in, a policymaker can't run from that, man. They can't run from that. Now they know, oh shit, we got to change up.
Absolutely. Something that I feel it's a common misconception that Julius subtly mentioned. And we're not talking about here only low-income housing or fair market. It's mixed income. And like, that's the reality of, the people in the US and everywhere else. Like area median income is a crucial term where developers are allocated, let's say 80% to area median income of 20% of the project. And then 20% area median income to another 10% of the project. So that way you have different people that cities need to function, all the way from teachers to security to the scientists. You need them all living in the same city for places to thrive. So that's a crucial, aspect of HouseKeys, that it provides across different income brackets.
Exactly. And what's super important to understand is these people can't make it to the council meeting, right? They don't have time to go to council meetings and be in the streets protesting. They're too busy working. But if their profile is out there representing them to their decision makers, their policy makers on their behalf, real time, while they go live their lives, now those policies that get created have to face the music of these folks that now have this set it and forget it constituency. They're set it and forget it advocacy on their behalf. It's important that we productize this stuff because it should be product grade if you're going to be able to really change a system. I mean, it shouldn't be a choice between like complacency and what we got now. like, let's be real. It's like, hey, the folks on the other, you're like, hey, man, stuff was terrible, but it shouldn't be like either it's complacent and we just complain like it can't be done, or like just rip it all out, baby bathwater, all of it. It's like, come on, you got to have something in the middle. And that's what AI does for us, is allow for intelligence and observability in a way that's never been possible before. And using that to do, again, we've used machine learning for like trivial things. Now we can actually solve some real domain-based problems today.
Julius, you've worked with builders like Toll Brothers, cities across California, Beverly Hills, San Mateo. What makes for a great partnership across sectors?
They got to know their pain, man. The builders that know the pain, they know. I mean, sometimes it's funny. Builders kind of you go in and out. I don't want to categorize them as small, medium, and large and just say the large builders understand it. But I think the more exposure those builders have to the reality that mixed income is what they got to face, those partners are the best to deal with. Builders fight me. I mean, I've been doing this 10 years. I've seen builders come around in year 6 and year 7 that were fully stubborn in year 1 and year 2. And so it's just, once they understand the pain, I have the kind of problem that we're solving that really is a pain point. Once you understand that pain, you understand the urgency. And once you do that, then you understand the value that HouseKeys provides by taking this off your hands so you can focus on what you do best, which is build houses, not manage compliance.
Julius, collaboration superpower. If you could choose one person, historic or living, to do a partnership with, who would it be?
Robert Smith, man, Vista Equity Partners. I think the guy's, $100 billion in assets under management.
Rockstar.
Yeah. Amazing. I mean, I would love to put what I'm building through the paces of his infrastructure to try to understand where we can get better and what we could do better. That guy, plus he understands philanthropy too. Of course, he's known for that, but it's that, set it aside. I mean, good people can be good people, but when they're great at the stuff that gets you paid and great at meeting bottom line, then that philanthropy that they have is sustainable. Like, he couldn't be the philanthropist if he wasn't, a dog when it comes to like the analytics and making sure that he can make a company profitable and understand where their weak points are. So I'd love to go through that gambit.
Vista Equity Partners?
Yes. He lives not too far from where I live, and he's got some cool cars. And every now he waves at me. He does not know who I am, but he's super nice.
He had the 4th largest enterprise software company in the world in 2019, right after Microsoft, Oracle, and SAP. Not too shabby. Jeffrey, collaboration superpower.
My collaboration superpower this week would be Howard Lutnick.
Oh my God.
Because, so if you just listen to this man speak, apparently every amazing idea anyone has ever had, he actually had it first. And then somebody else is just the person that actually makes it happen, like does the work. Can you imagine partnering with someone like that? Right?
I can't. The Secretary of Commerce since February. What a time.
And so I feel like, Zach might come with something super esoteric, but in his mind, he's thinking to himself, damn it. I want to collaborate with Howard Lutnick. Sorry, brah. He's all mine. Howard, if you're listening, call me.
He is listening right after his 10th appearance of the day on Fox, so he's definitely listening. Zach, Aarons, who's your collaboration superpower this week?
Yeah, I was going to do Howard Lutnick, but I'm going to pick somebody else. I usually do. Yeah, Jeff mentioned esoteric members of history have been dead for hundreds, if not thousands of years, trying to educate the hundreds of millions of listeners to this podcast, give them perspective that business didn't start with Al Gore's creation of the internet. But today, because I have supply chain on my mind, and supply chains are so important, as I mentioned earlier, for housing affordability, not just the manufacturing and building materials, but the distribution and delivery of building materials is critical to keeping housing or making housing more affordable in an increasingly unaffordable paradigm. I'm going to go with a living person today, and that person is none other than Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba. This is a guy who used to be an English teacher for many years. This is a guy who I just learned he tried to get a job or worked very briefly at a Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise. So not necessarily your traditional tech entrepreneur, but had such a compelling vision for completely reimagining and reinventing global supply chains that he was able to build Alibaba, one of the largest tech companies in the world. And one of my favorite stories about him, which makes me want to work with him, is one of our other collaboration Superpower recipients, Masayoshi Son of SoftBank Corp, famously backed Jack Ma just because of the quote unquote twinkle in his eye. So I need more people in my life who have twinkles in their eyes. Jeff Berman, frequent, constant twinkle, but I can't see his eyes that frequently. And so I need more twinkling in my life, and I need better and more efficient, technologically empowered supply chain management. So that's why I'm going today with a living human being, Jack Ma.
Love that.
Just as he's been publicly rehabilitated on February 2025, has not been seen in public for 4 years. Good timing to resurface, Jack. Welcome back.
Let's confirm that you are indeed still living, Jack. We need you. We need you now more than ever.
Julius, where can Tangent listeners, cities, public sector officials, developers, and homeowners and renters learn more about HouseKeys and connect with you?
myhousekeys.com. Simple. myhousekeys.com.
Look at his hats. Why does a California guy wear New York colors?
I'm an
It's
East
a
Those
Coast
are
good
guy.
question.
Dutch New Amsterdam colors, my friend.
Been in California 23 years now, so but I still, New York's in my heart, man. I'm a Knicks fan by heart, so I, never gonna drop that. Even the Warriors, I love watching the Warriors play, but love my Knicks, man. No matter how terrible they are, or how great they are, I love my Knicks.
Julius Nyanda, founder and CEO of HouseKeys, unlocking housing opportunity for cities, developers, homeowners, and renters. Thank you so much for coming to Tangent today and sharing your story, your passion, and your vision.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking and meet with you all. This was great. Thank you.
If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review Tangent, and share the show with a friend. This episode is produced by me, Edward Cohen. Thanks for listening to Tangent PropTech, and remember, collaboration is our superpower. So stay curious and always be learning.